There's no one like you, and there never will be.
From the producer of Bohemian Rhapsody, there are many legends, but there is only one. Michael, rated PG-13, in theaters April 24.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Eric Hersey, who, we're doing this just before you get in a car and drive to Virginia. Is that right?
Yeah, this is going to be hot off the press, Jim. I think this is the quickest turnaround Dave's ever going to have an episode. So the news is really breaking here today. So, yeah, we're heading to Virginia to do a cheer comp for the last one of the season, thankfully, and then we can go on with our merry life until baseball season starts, which is right now. So
okay. And I want to say it was on last week's show that you put out the word that we were looking for some reviews of the Epic Universal Podcast over on iTunes and Spotify and the like. And our lovely listeners actually deliver the goods, right?
Right. We're trying to get 100 reviews before our 100th episode, so we got a couple, and we were very thankful. We ended up getting up to 87, so we have a couple more to go, but that's not too bad for one request. So as we promised, I would love to give a shout out to Flash Stash, who was, I think, might have been the first one to give it, and says, love the new park and love hearing all the news here. So thank you. That's a 5-star, funny and informative. So we'll say Jim is funny, and informative. So you get all 5 stars there, Jim. The next one is from Eddie G, and it's a Jim Hill Media groupie checks in and says, I'm so fortunate to have been listening to so very many of your podcasts. This is a fine addition. I hadn't gone to Epic, but followed Eric's valuable advice and had the time of our life when we finally went in January 2026. Been a follower of the podcast since its beginning. Try it. You'll like it. So thank you very much, Eddie and Flash Stash, for leaving those lovely reviews. And we want to get to that 100. So if anybody else wants to leave them, we'll be reading some more from the last couple weeks. But if you go to jimhillmedia.com/epic, it'll take you right to the Apple Podcast page, and you can also leave us a review, and we'll read it live or on air, or however we deliver it. You'll get to hear what you say on the next podcast.
Okay, and speaking of things that we do here on this podcast, again, we are contractually obligated to talk about the Wicked movies, and again, more to the point, I live at Target. I'm in there 2 and 3 times a week, easy, and Wicked for Good is now a Blu-ray and a DVD and, all that. So I figured, well, the toys would be remaindered at this point. I wanted to see what was left. And what was more interesting, though, Eric, was I wandered into the Lego aisle, and they actually have Universal-related Lego sets now. You can build the DeLorean from Back to the Future. They have a Jaws themed set where literally you can build the orca, and you've got Hooper, you've got Quint and Sheriff Brody being attacked by the shark. And I want to say they also have Toothless from the How to Train Your Dragon movies. So, again, it just, for me, what's kind of interesting is to watch whatever space Disney is in, Universal these days finds a way in. So, all those Disney Lego sets are now being joined by Universal Lego sets. And of course, there were some Wicked ones in there in the pile. So, but just wanted to share that. And let's see, speaking of info I need to share, I want to remind you that this is a sponsored podcast, and the nice folks at Unlocked Magic. So if you're planning a trip to Universal Orlando or Walt Disney World, check out Unlocked Magic. Listeners to the Epic Universal Podcast are saving upwards of 12% on theme park tickets, and they now have the ability to purchase Express Pass through Unlocked Magic, saving even more money. So be sure to visit unlockmagic.com and save today. Now, moving to the news portion of the show, Eric, you've been out there diligently digging away. What did you discover this week?
Well, the first news story that I kind of want to throw out to you actually was pretty recent. It was Wednesday morning. Did you see that they, at over in Universal proper, that they had an issue at the very beginning of the day with ticket entry?
Oh, I think I heard about this. This was a turnstile malfunction. Is that correct?
Oh, well, yeah. And essentially it's interesting. And I mean, it didn't last very long, but long enough that, everybody that was rope dropping essentially was all backing up and it got crowded in the area. And it was just very fascinating. I don't really think of these contingency plans or what would happen. But Jim, what happens when you're using Face ID technology or fingerprints and so forth, and you can't get in the park because that portion goes down? Like, what the heck do they do? Yeah. There was social posts and showing everybody kind of stretch. And I don't think it was long term, and it wasn't like all the parks. It wasn't something catastrophic. But imagine if you couldn't get that working for the day. Like, no one has physical tickets, or how would you verify? I'm just wondering, they have to have some type of plan, right?
They do, but the hard reality is that so many of the parks are going in this direction. This paperless, this paperless world, coupled with the fact that, it's your face and fingerprint. That's now how you're identified in the parks. And if this tech goes down, right. That's bad.
Well, I just remember when I worked retail, Jim, when I was working retail and the credit card machine went down, you'd get those big clunker ones that you kind of like, you still would use. And I'm like, I don't know what they could do, because it's not like physical tickets anymore. It would just be a matter of thousands upon thousands of people just waiting. And then if nobody's in the park, they're not selling, churros, and they're not getting, their express passes. So I just thought it was interesting enough. Obviously, it wasn't a huge deal. It's probably not picked up on too much of the news stories, but kind of problematic. And I'm just curious what their process is. So if we have any team members or people that's been run into this, what do you guys do?
If anybody wants to share, what's the contingency, at a moment like this? You break out the brownie camera, and it's like, somebody comes out with, a canvas and oil paints. It's like, just hang on, we're going to paint your face. So.
That's it. Or maybe it's just a day free. Everybody in, and it's complete chaos.
There we go. Just as long as you buy, a bunch of churros, we'll be fine.
That's it.
So, all right. But that happened at the mothership, Universal Studios Florida. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think the next story we're talking about here is actually over at Islands of Adventure. So we've all been familiar, but it must have just briefly passed me by last week so Demolition has actually begun on Lost Continent. Did you see this? Like, the walls are up and they're starting to work.
Yeah, and there's a part of me that especially since the walls are up around the Sinbad Theater, which, a wonderful physical complex for a stunt show, played for years, and I know it's time. Lord knows it's time that something new went into this side of the park. But still, it's kind of sad. But again, we don't have any specifics about this. We just know future development, right?
Yeah. Well, we just got walls up. Months ago we talked about how they were kind of maybe clearing some trees, and we weren't 100% sure what they were doing that for. If they were just doing maintenance, and it's now obviously they're doing the demolition. But they don't have everything. Like Mythos is still. You're still capable there. They did relocate like a gift shop. Mystic is still around. So like they don't have it all, but we don't really know what's going on. No one said anything. There's not much, but there's there was permits that were saying the 4.9 acres buildings, utility, and so forth. And we kind of measured that out, and that is the 4.9 acres. So it seems to me like if you didn't get down there to say your goodbyes, it's too late now. You're not going to be able to see Poseidon's Fury and the statues or any of it. So I was happy that I got to go into one of the cool zones. So I got to see Sinbad with my own eyes, even if it was just sitting in there during a 90-degry day. But Jim, is the rumors Pokemon? Is that what everybody was saying? We thought Zelda.
All
but...
right. as it keeps getting explained to me, Pokemon is Universal Studios Florida, and that's supposedly being held for Simpsons, whereas Zelda is supposedly Lost Continent and between Poseidon's Fury and now the Sinbad Theater, where we'll see something of size. But again, I have and will continue to be wrong. So if some, tell you what, I'll wait till what Alicia Stella tells me, and then we'll know for sure.
Yeah. So there's lots of movement going on. Did you see? We talked about it briefly, but there was lots of permits talk last week. Mm-hmm. Did you see that there is a patch of area near Epic? It's near Epic, but it's not right next door. It's kind of actually next to a Top Golf that they're kind of land clearing. And we've got lots of overhead shots by Reconstructors, got a lot of shots on there. And we actually had a Universal representative come out and actually tell us what this was, in a sense. Did you kind of see any of this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued by this is land maintenance and nothing else. And it's like, really?
Well, yeah, right. So
Okay.
so it is. So what's happening now is they're working and they're putting a whole bunch of sand down, which I'm not. I'm not in that field. I don't know how this all works. But it's basically, I think it's 35 acres or so, but it's right next to a Top Golf. So you get all these cool pictures here, and it's a distance. It's not like it's right next to Epic, but it is a pretty big area. So I'm not 100% sure what they put there, but I mean, are you thinking maybe would it be a good place for a hotel, or is it going to be something a little less sexy of where this is where we're going to park buses? Or did I hear anything of a second City Walk concept before? Did anybody say something like that before?
I mean, again, long range, the plan always for Epic Universe and Environs was that this was supposed to be the park that captured the folks that are conventioneering over at the Orange County Convention Center. With the notion of, hey, we're doing a party after today's event. Come with us over to Epic Universe. What was interesting when you talk with the folks at Universal Creative about this, it's just the hard reality was that nobody anticipated when they put this plan in motion that COVID-19 would happen, and that for a lot of companies, the annual convention to Orlando got put off for a couple of years. And in fact, the Orange County Convention Center only this year is seeing some shows return. And so that part of the business plan, as in we're going to be the special place that people go to when they come and hold their convention in Orlando, it's like, well, that's just coming back. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that plan and a lot of the stuff that was anticipated for that, for example, over on Disney Dish, Len has been talking about how they are supposedly, we were just talking about the facial recognition software, and the notion is that there's evidently a plan for Epic Universe where after, say, 6 p.m., the gates of the park open to the public. And folks can then come in and shop in the stores and eat in the restaurants. But if they go to enter the individual portals to each of the lands, there'll be a cast member that says, well, can we see your admission ticket to the park for the day? And if you don't have one, it's like, I'm sorry, you can't come into Dark Universe or, the Land of Berk or the Ministry of Magic. But you're welcome to stay out here in the center of the park and shop and eat. And by the way, our nighttime show, our fountain show, will be presented, at such and such a time. So, there's that version of the plan as well. And I guess that's sort of the stopgap until the conventions come back.
Yeah. Well, that's funny, Jim, because that's kind of what I was talking about. The next is that they actually drained the Celestial Park fountain just now, which is signs that, hey, we're still working on this nighttime show upgrade. But I remember I heard you guys talking about it on the dish. I'm like, hold on, what are they doing? They're shutting down. And no, it was on the dish. It was the latest Case 4, actually, because our buddy Chris Cox is actually in Epic right now. And you guys did the Case 4, and you talked about should you buy the Express Pass. So everybody, when you're done with this, and if you're interested in obviously Epic, go over and listen to the Case 4 with Chris Cox, because that was a good one. But that's where Len was like, hey, they're going to shut down. And I'm like, that is insane. But if you think about it, Jim, when we were out at Horror Unleashed, they didn't let you into the individual rooms without scanning your ticket again. So like they have the technology to basically say, hey, this is a portal. That's no different when we were going to those houses. You had to walk through the gate. So certainly they could open it up. So that's very interesting, nonetheless. But so I mean, I guess if you let people in at nighttime, they get to see the nighttime show and get people into the park. Good way to get people sampling, I guess, and buying from Pizza Moon. So very interesting.
No, I agree. And in fact, I think the thing that fascinates me about this is, isn't there one giant restaurant at Epic facing into the Celestial Gardens that is yet to open? Though I guess, again, that makes sense given that they're still supposedly throttling attendance levels at the park. You don't want a big empty restaurant. I think we saw a little bit too much of that when you and I went to Universal Horror Unleashed in Vegas. That restaurant they have right inside there, just next to the bar. It was, I'd say, we were there like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and 10 diners, 15 diners?
Oh, I think you're being, you might have double vision, Jim.
Okay.
Because there wasn't that many. No, it was, I mean, we'll give them a break. It was early. People probably didn't want to start drinking too early. But yeah,
okay.
It's interesting enough that, yes, you definitely don't want from a perception standpoint to have empty buildings and so forth. But that whole process would be interesting also because there are some attractions that are in Celestial Park. So like if you're going to do the carousel, or you would have to scan everybody's ticket. And that would be, I just remember it was kind of a pain in the butt to have my phone out, even with those 4 houses to do that. So you would have to have some type of technology. But if the face scanning is the way to go, I'd be interested in seeing this. But it does look like it's with the draining of the fountain, that we are getting closer and closer to a nighttime show. And whether they're going to have paying guests or unpaying guests come in and hang out and see that fountain at the show, we'll soon find out. Coming weeks.
Very, very much looking forward to that finally coming online. And speaking of shows at the park, our next story comes all the way from Japan, right?
Yeah, I got questions on this, Jim. I just want to know if Japan is the most ridiculous, or at least in this case, it has the most IP that just doesn't seem like it belongs from an American. I just know these other parks. So they have like a Pokemon, and then they end up having Sesame Street. And now I find out that they have the Peanut characters, Peanut characters in a Universal Park. They're doing a Let's Smile Together show for the 25th anniversary. It seems to be happening for the entire year from March of this year until March of next year. Jim, how the heck did they get the Peanuts, and how long have they had the Peanuts, and why does it seem like they should be at that's our Cedar Points, right? Cedar Fairs.
It is stateside. In fact, Knott's Berry Farm, again owned by the Cedar Fair folks, have had the Peanuts characters over in Camp Snoopy for decades. On the other hand, Universal Studios Japan has kind of cornered the market on cute characters. I mean, remember, Hello Kitty was in there. In fact, I remember walking the stores with Lauren at Universal Studios Hollywood, and they had some pretty unique Hello Kitty stuff that referenced Universal films. My understanding was they were looking for quote unquote new cute characters to use as part of the 25th anniversary. The Peanuts characters had not been in Universal Japan, so they were considered new. Also, got to remember that this year, I want to say, is the 75th anniversary of the launch of the Peanuts comic strip. In fact, there's that wonderful book that Mark Evanier wrote about the characters and Charles Schultz. So it might be that, Japan took a calculated risk here. It's like, okay, Peanuts are celebrating their anniversary. Why don't we bring them here to celebrate our anniversary? But yeah, it's we have a show that they're presenting at the park. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's Universal Wonderland. Let's Smile Together, and it has Lucy, Charlie Brown, Sally, and they're in all types of different costumes. I guess pretty star-studded event, and it takes place in the Wonderland section. And they have background decor referencing Schroeder, Woodstock, and Joe Cool. Which who the heck is Joe Cool? I don't even know who Joe Cool is.
Oh, boy. Joe Cool is Snoopy going to college. He's dressed in a sweatshirt and sunglasses. One of that Beagle's many personas, along with the World War I flying ace, and Snoopy, has done a lot of things, over the past 75 years.
Yeah, no, so they're there. So I mean, if you're over in Japan, you can go hang out with them. It is going to go on for the entire year, so it'll be featured across the entire 25th anniversary special. So they're also having merchandise available. So I would love to get out to Japan to see them and Pokemon and everything else that's going on. But we have plenty of stuff here to do in the States if you can't get to Japan.
We do. And speaking of anniversaries, this week is the 10th anniversary of the opening of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Hogsmeade Village, at Universal Hollywood. And when Eric and I get back from this break, we're going to talk about how that land got added to the upper lot out in Southern California and everything that it took to make that happen. But before we do that, there's this.
Amazon presents Jeff versus Taco Truck Salsa. Whether it's Verde, Roja, or the orange one. For Jeff, trying any salsa is like playing Russian roulette with a flamethrower. Luckily, Jeff saved with Amazon and stocked up on antacids, ginger tea, and milk. Habanero? More like habanero, yes. Save the everyday with Amazon.
Predator Badlands, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Here, you're not the predator. You're the prey. 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 Prey.
Critics are saying it's epic, stunning, and breathtaking.
Many have come here. None have survived.
Predator Badlands, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+, rated PG-13.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
And we're back. All right, folks. We got some news this week that was Harry Potter related. Eric, did you see this thing about the Forbidden Forest search for the Hippogriff thing that's going to be presented at this year's Universal Fan Fest nights out in Hollywood?
Oh, is that the new thing they just announced? I didn't catch it. What do we got?
Well, it's again, it actually begins in just a couple of weeks. In fact, it starts on Thursday night, April 23rd. And then again, the Fan Fest night itself runs on select nights at that theme park through Saturday, May 16th. But this thing, the Forbidden Forest Search for the Hippogriff, is going to take place in the Hogsmeade Village section of Universal Studios Hollywood. It's going to be done after dark, and it's described as an immersive experience that will take guests on a guided, story-driven journey. And the conceit here is you're joining a Hogwarts professor who supposedly teaches care of magical creatures up there in the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and evidently a hippogriff has gone missing. And so, you're handed lanterns and you head out into the woods, and while you're, searching for this hippogriff, you run across Cornish pixies, live owls, the spiders that so frightened Ron Weasley, and even a loose copy of the Monster Book of Monsters. Watch out, they bite. But as I mentioned just before we went to break, what's kind of significant right now, Wizarding World-wise, is it was 10 years ago this week that the Hollywood version of Hogsmeade Village first opened, April 7th, 2016. And Eric, now that you've experienced two versions of Hogsmeade Village, I was wondering, any thoughts? Is either of them more successful for you, or which one did you like better?
Oh, well, I mean, there's one that you can come directly from Simpsons right into, and then the other one is kind of in its own little path. I think the one at Islands of Adventure, I would say, is still a little bit more immersive and more of its own secluded land. So I think that is. But once again, that was the first one I experienced, and I'm one of those believers. I think the first one you see is kind of the one you kind of gravitate to. But they were both very pleasant, and butterbeer tasted great on both coasts.
Well, there we go. Oh, by the way, that there's another one. This one we were just talking about in Universal Japan. That's over in Osaka, and that version of Hogsmeade Village opened July 15, 2014. And what's special about that one, Eric, is it has its own version of the Black Lake, which is where evidently the giant squid, that works at Hogwarts lives. But no, evidently, if you're a photographer, you especially love the Japanese version of Hogsmeade Village because of the reflections of Hogwarts Castle you can get off of this lake. But again, what's kind of interesting again is that opened July 15, 2014, but just 1 week earlier is when you were just talking about Diagon Alley over in Universal Studios Florida. But anyway, we're talking about the 10th anniversary of the Hollywood version of Wizarding World. And we first learned that this was going to happen December 6, 2011. That's roughly a year and a half after the original Hogsmeade Village opens down in Florida, Eric. And by the way, in the intervening months, attendance levels at Islands of Adventure jumped 36% just on the back of the opening of that one land.
Yeah, I remember I was working with a coworker, and they were telling me they were going to Florida, and I was a Disney person at the time, and they said, "Well, we have to go to Universal." I said, "What are you going to Universal for?" And they basically were like, "It was Harry Potter's there." So I know for a fact there were a lot of people that absolutely wanted to go to Universal because Harry Potter opened. So you see that jump immediately because it drew people in.
No. It just because they did such an amazing job of replicating the world of the films, the Potter fans just had to go to these places. So we knew it was coming to Hollywood. And in fact, when Universal made the announcement, appropriately enough, they did it in front of the Globe Theatre in that's the UK themed section of Streets of the World, which we talked about at Universal Studios Hollywood on a recent episode of the Epic Universal podcast. This was so significant, Eric, that then California Governor Jerry Brown came out for this announcement, and he, just like everybody there, he knocked back a cold mug of butterbeer. But Jerry was there because, again, he'd heard about the 36% jump in attendance at the Florida parks. More to the point, that Universal was going to spend $500 million to build this thing, and that when it was open, they'd be adding 1,000 jobs to the local economy. So this was a very big deal for the state of California. The then question from the press assembled at this event was, all right, so this is December 2011. When's this thing going to open? And, because it's like, look, we look at what you did in Florida. That thing was kind of a bullet train. The project got revealed, Eric, in May of 2007. And construction then began that January, 2008. And in Florida, they were able to take advantage of a couple of things. I mean, for example, there was already an attraction there, Flight of the Unicorn, likewise Dueling Dragons. And those two then got rethemed to be Harry Potter-themed attractions, Flight of the Hippogriff, and, of course, Dragon Challenge. And, for example, the Enchanted Oak Tavern, that all got torn down except for the kitchen, which then became the kitchen of the Three Broomsticks. So they were able to get that land up out of the ground and open by June of 2010. So it was actually 3 years and 10 days from the announcement to, this new land opening at Islands Adventure. On the other hand, the Universal Studio Japan version of the Wizarding World, Eric, that came together even faster. Now, they got theirs built for $445 million. It was announced in May of 2012, some 6 months after we learned that Hollywood was getting a Wizarding World. But they got theirs up and open, as I mentioned, in July of 2014. So they got theirs from announcement to first guest walking through the door, 2 years and 2 months.
That is pretty insane from a time standpoint. You don't see that kind of construction with anything nowadays. So.
Oh, no. Absolutely. Now, mind you, this was just not going to happen with Universal Studios Hollywood, largely because the folks at Universal Destinations and Experiences had decided that they were going to use this opportunity, the construction of the West Coast version of the Wizarding World. They're going to use it as an excuse to basically reinvent the entire upper lot at this theme park. And remember, we were talking about the $500 million they're going to spend on the Wizarding World. Redoing the entire upper lot, Eric, that was $1.6 billion. And it was going to take 5 years. But the thinking of the folks at Universal Hollywood was, well, look, if Disney can do this, and remember, Disney had just finished 4 years of disruption at California Adventure as it underwent its own $1.1 billion redo from October of 2008 through June of 2012. It's like, look, if the folks going to Disney can put up with that many construction expenses, visited Universal, they can do the same. And we'll get to the specifics, what happened and in what order in a moment. But before we do that, there's this.
Refreshing wild cherry cola meets smooth cream. The treat you deserve. Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cream. Treat yourself.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
And we're back. Okay. So just to remind you here, Southern Californians, they learned that they're going to get a West Coast version of the Wizarding World in December of 2011. Mind you, when reporters pressed the folks at Universal Creative about, well, when's this going to open? When can I bring my kids here to experience, Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey? And they're like, well, 2015, more likely 2016. But again, that was because there's a $1.6 billion redo of the upper lot in the works. And Eric, this is going to take years.
Yeah.
But you have to start somewhere. So in this case, Universal starts at the outermost edge of the upper lot. They first shut down Universal Hollywood's version of Terminator 2 3D, Battle Across Time, which, by the way, was built on top of this theme park's 7-story tall Frankenstein parking lot that opened back in '88 and had room for 2,800 cars. But anyway, Hollywood's Terminator 2 3D closes, December 29th, 2012. And this show building is then gutted, so it then can become the West Coast home for a super popular Universal Studios Florida attraction, Despicable Me, Minion Mayhem. And I have to ask, did Miles like Minion Mayhem?
Yeah, no, we got to do this. We were all, I mean, it's a clone, right? I mean, it's the same as the one in Florida, correct? I mean, it felt like it was, but yeah,
no, absolutely.
We managed. Yeah, we were in that whole area.
What's kind of interesting is that the Universal Orlando version of this attraction, Minion Mayhem, it actually opened July 2nd of 2012, and the folks at Universal Creative looked at how popular it was, and it's like, oh, this is coming to Hollywood. So again, less than 6 months later, they're shutting down Terminator 2 3D out in Hollywood to make room for this thing, which then gets open for April of 2014. And by the way, the one thing, in fact, I wanted to ask, did you guys get into the Super Silly Fun Land that's sort of next to the exit for Minion Mayhem? It's a version of the Seaside Amusement Park that we saw in the first Despicable Me film.
Yeah, they didn't have the water section going, but that was good anyway, because I was not going to let the kids get all soaked and wet anyway. But yeah, we got to do the the little the Dumbo style ride and great views. But yeah, you're up on top of a parking lot, right?
Yeah. And, by the way, if you're driving on the 101, this thing is when you see the giant minion up on the hillside, that's this building. That's a fun icon. Yeah, I'm driving by Universal. I'm right next to the giant minion. But anyway, speaking of big changes, between the time when Terminator 2 3D closed and when the Hollywood version of Despicable Me Minion Mayhem opened, that's when the centermost portion of the upper lot was undergoing a transformation. The center of the park, the Universal Plaza, has since become home to Universal Studios Hollywood's seasonal celebrations like Chinese New Year and Grinchmas. And it's a big, handsome public space. In fact, Universal has sometimes staged after-hour parties in there where they can set up space for over 2,000 diners. But anyway, Universal Plaza opens August of 2013. And in fact, the 29th of August, just as Labor Day is happening. And on the other hand, a week after this, Eric, the Gibson Arena, which was a favorite live music venue for many Southern Californians, had seating for 6,000 people, had been up and running since 1973. It had to come down. Where the arena was where the West Coast version of Hogwarts Castle was going to be built. But anyway, again, if we're talking 2013, if we pivot back to the East Coast for a moment, this is when Fast Food Boulevard, which, by the way, expanded the footprint of Florida's Springfield, USA, from just the immediate area around the Simpsons ride. I mean, initially it was just the Simpsons ride and the Quickie Mart.
Yeah.
Then it expanded to the footprint of Springfield, USA, all the way out to the Animals Actors stage. And so many people were lining up on the East Coast to get drinks at Moe's or to buy a clogger at Krusty Burger that Universal Creative knew, oh, God, we got to bring this to California. So, January of 2014, old favorites out there in Hollywood, like Doc Brown's Chicken. Have you ever seen any of the artwork for the Doc Brown's Chicken stand at Universal Hollywood?
No, I have not seen this, but I know I'm going to head to Google after this because that sounds intriguing.
Okay. It's a great wood sculpture of Christopher Lloyd, the great Scott, but again, he's holding, I want to say, a chicken leg. This is the greatest chicken of all time. But yeah, that had been up and running on the upper lot for years. And this was the interesting part, the truly interesting part of the construction, the changes that were made at the Universal lot. Because basically what Universal Creative did is they started building simultaneously Springfield, USA, the Hollywood version, but also the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Now, Springfield opens in May of 2015, whereas the West Coast Wizarding World won't open until April of 2016. But again, they're being built back to back, and this set of buildings that line both the streets of, again, Springfield, USA, as well as Hogsmeade Village. Eric, the buildings are the exact same height. So what's kind of interesting about these two lands is that the buildings themselves act as, for lack of a better term, the berm that separates the Wizarding World from Springfield,
right.
Which, by the way, is absolutely ingenious theme park design. When you're deep down inside of Springfield, USA, and you remember this from having been in that park, you can't see the Wizarding World. I mean, you can look up at, the Springfield nuclear power plant. You can look at the Springfield jail where what's his name is escaping. On the other hand, if you're deep inside of Hogsmeade Village and you're looking up at the Three Broomsticks and Ollivanders and all of the snow on the rooftops and the twisty chimneys, you can't see any of the cartoony Springfield, USA. Right. It's incredibly well designed.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, it was very immersive. Now, granted, when you walk out of the thing and now you see a giant Fast and the Furious and cars dancing, and then Springfield. So there's one section that's a little confused, but once you get deep enough, you're okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong there. I mean, on the other hand, what's interesting to me is that as you mentioned, the Fast and the Furious Hollywood Drift show building is at least as tall as the buildings in Springfield, USA, and Hogsmeade Village. So there's a consistent size and scale to what they're doing. I mean, it is a little weird to walk out of the arch in Harry Potter, the Wizarding World, and suddenly see the coaster there. But speaking of which, though, there had been an issue. The one design flaw that I think a lot of people saw with the original Wizarding World for Hollywood is when this place opened in April of 2016, it was a cul-de-sac. I mean, if you wanted to do the Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey ride, you had to hike all the way deep into the park. And then, on the other hand, if you wanted to then experience the other attractions at Universal, Hollywood, you had to then turn around and walk all the way back out to the archway that Eric and I were just talking about, the one where you can now stand and look at the dancing cars for Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift. But while Eric and I were there in March, he showed me, something I'd never seen at Universal Hollywood before. They had added a walkway that actually took you by, well, it was built between the queue, the outdoor queue for Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, and the back of the restaurant outdoor seating for Three Broomsticks. And what's great about this walkway is that it took you into Springfield, USA. In fact, you could walk straight out of the Wizarding World, and right there, if you hung a right, was the entrance, the escalators that would take you down to the tram tour. Yep. So you no longer had to retrace your steps to continue your adventure in the upper lot. You had this walkway. And Eric, as it turns out, that thing was crazy new. It had only been built and opened last year, August of 2025.
Well, you said it was new. I didn't know, everything's new to me, so I had no idea. But it was nice little, and I used that. We used that multiple times. Oh, yeah. In and out, and save some steps.
Eric has a butterbeer habit that he had to support. We don't like to talk about it, but anyway, mind you, in addition to these new shows and attractions that get added to the upper lot, over the course of this period, the upper lot also added some new stores. We got the Animation Studio store that opened in March of 2018, 6,000 square feet. Wandered around that with Lauren. I think we were scouting stuff to talk about on our I Want That Too merch podcast. Also, in fact, February of 2024, we saw the Power Up Cafe open in pretty much in the same area on the upper lot. And the beauty of this, Eric, is that if you want Super Mario themed treats, you no longer have to get on the Starway and take 3 giant escalators down to the lower lot and then hike all the way into Super Nintendo Land. That you can get your Mario treats right here in the upper lot. Now, just to be fair here, again, I would argue that $1.6 billion that Universal Creative spent on reimagining the upper lot was worth it. Not everything worked. In fact, at some point, Eric and I think we talked about this as we were recording our on-location show at the Universal Studios Hollywood. We're going to have to talk about the Walking Dead walkthrough attraction they had there in the upper lot. That was relatively short-lived. It was only there from July of 2016 through March of 2020. But Greg Nicotero, the makeup master and the producer of the show on AMC, personally supervised this thing. It was very ambitious. It had the same level of detail that you find in those mazes that Universal does annually for its Halloween Horror Nights, and lots of interesting ideas just didn't quite work. But myself and the Hersey family had a wonderful time exploring the upper lot at Universal Studios Hollywood when we visited there last month. And to be honest, can't wait to get back there later this summer. In fact, maybe we'll make a special trip when we're all out there to do the D23 Expo in August, largely to experience the Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift Coaster, which I think, as we mentioned on the podcast when we recorded in the park, was kind of in rehearsal. They were definitely running it, just not with any people on it, right?
No, they were definitely running. We kept whizzing by, and in the day afterwards, that's when they had their little dancing show right beforehand, emulating the old dancing show they had in the tram tour. So we just missed it by a day, but hopefully we'll have people on it when we're out there come this summer. So it'll be exciting. But no, this was great. This was great, Jim, because I'm super happy you waited to do this story on this anniversary as opposed to last year, because I wouldn't have had a clue what you're talking about the entire time. But now I know. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and like I said, really these days, when I think about how cluttered the Universal upper lot used to be, it's got beautiful sight lines now. It's easy to navigate, and but at the same time, I'm going to be fascinated to see how they handle the crowds for Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift this summer. But again, that's a story for another time. And to be honest, I think that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Epic Universal Podcast. And by the way, folks, if you have topics and suggestions for future shows, please feel free to send those along to myself and Eric through social media. Anything else to add before we close up here, Mr. Hersey?
A big thank you to David Gray for turning things around and working with us. So our producer, there ain't nobody better in the world. So thanks, Dave.
There we go.
And thanks for all those reviews everybody's given. Thank you. We really appreciate it. That really helps get the word out. But more importantly, it shows, it tells what your you want. So put down what you want to hear. I know we had a couple suggestions, and we'll be filing through those, and we'll have Jim do his research.
Well, there we go. All right. Well, thanks again, folks, for listening, and we will be back next week.